Secrets of the C-Suite, the podcast, is for anyone interested in leadership and the wins, losses, and lessons of being an executive. We are two women who have successfully navigated C-Suite roles and are sharing our experiences. We will be bringing on guests to tell their stories and want to spark honest conversation and discussion, which may include swearing and lots of laughs. Join us on this adventure.
Hi there, and welcome to another episode of Secrets of the C-Suite, the podcast. I'm Susan, and I'm here with my collaborator, Juliet Clothier. Hi, Juliet.
Hey, Susan.
We see each other, even though you, our audience, don't get to see us, although we've talked about maybe migrating to a video format, but to be determined. So
Exactly.
I thought, Juliet, we could just start by taking a minute to talk about our respective plans to take time off away from the podcast, away from our clients, away from our desks. I, for example, by the time this episode drops, the vacation will be long over. But as we're recording it, tomorrow morning, my spouse and I are getting up early and we are going on a road trip to the high desert here in South Africa. And I'll be away for a week, disconnected mostly. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to it.
That's great. I think one of the things that when you work for yourself, the idea of vacation requires a lot of planning. Not that when you're working in a company, it doesn't, but it requires a lot of planning because you're it. So you have to let your clients know, and you have to block your calendar, and you have to really be consciously make a conscious effort to create that space for yourself. And I think when you're in an organization, you have to find your backup person, obviously, and your out of office memo, but it's a little bit more part of the culture that people take vacation. And I think, but there are people within the organization who don't take vacation or work on vacation and don't really disconnect. I'm encouraging consulting clients when I go in and I'm working with leaders, I see that they're not taking time off, that they're working late, that they're working weekends, that they're really, and they just don't know how to take the break and make that space. And it's, I'll say you should disconnect. You should not answer those emails at 11 o'clock at night. There is no reason to do that. And I often get that where it's like, but if I don't do it, I won't sleep, or I won't do, and it's like, wow, that's a really scary place to live. And I feel for people who are struggling with that, because I've always been good at taking vacations. So,
well, I'm thinking back to the days when I was in an organization, and since very early on, when I was moving up the ladder, I always wanted the next promotion, to be very honest, because I wanted more vacation. And there were these cliffs, like if you were a grade X, then you'd get more vacation. And that was my driving force. I wanted more time to have adventures. And what I realized early on when I was in a leadership position was if I went on vacation and I went to some, Timbuktu place where they didn't have the internet. And of course, most of my career was well before phones and even satellite connectivity, which I rely on today, I would be disconnected. I'd be like, I'm going for 3 weeks. I'm going to be hiking in the Himalaya. Sorry. And we'd make a plan around that. And I always thought I was brilliant for having those vacations that were really, really off the grid, because I couldn't rationalize being connected. There was no way to be connected, and people couldn't expect me to be connected. But I love the fact that when you are working with your clients, whether they're coaching clients or they are consulting clients, you are opening the question of what's their relationship to relaxation? What's their relationship to restoration and free time? Even taking this road trip, I found myself today just going, I'm a little nervous. I'm going to lose my vibe. I've been feeling really good about my business this last month. And I'm like, well, if I go away and I'm not tending to it, will I lose it? So it's just interesting, the things that come up when you step away.
Yeah, I think too, in this environment, we've had struggles with people feeling secure in their job, which we're going to talk a little bit about in this duo cast. So today is just Susan and I talking to each other. But I do think that I can't help but coach leaders, even when I'm on a consulting assignment. And I do talk about that to the CEOs that hire me for consulting, which is basically kind of optimizing their teams, helping people, identify where there's gaps, all those things. But as part of it, I can't help but coach. And I do say, I will offer that to this new leader in this role or this leader that's struggling. I can help by also coaching and giving them some framework for improving their situation and taking responsibility for improving their situation. And a big part of it is, how are you taking time? What are you doing for you outside of this work environment? Because it's not sustainable. You will burn out.
Yep.
Most definitely.
And of course, we know the power of that role modeling. When your boss never takes vacation, it certainly sets a tone and sends a message to the culture and the employees at large. So anyway, I'm looking forward to vacation. But for now, we are going to pivot to our topic. As Juliet has indicated, it's just the two of us today. And for those of you who've been listening to us for a while, you know that this is a new addition to season 2. We didn't do this in season 1. And we're trying periodically to just have topics where the two of us talk and riff and share what we're thinking about something that we think is interesting and meaningful to you, our audience. So we certainly hope you agree. Our topic today is to do some exploration, some excavation, perhaps, at the intersection of psychological safety and risk-taking, specifically around personal and professional growth and in someone's career. And I took a little bit of the lead here, so I'm just going to talk a little bit, and then we're going to deepen and expand, because we actually had a really good warm-up conversation on this. So the thing about psychological safety is there is a definition to it, and the definition is that if you feel psychologically safe, you feel that it is okay to speak up, to disagree, to offer new ideas, without fear of judgment or negative consequences in the workplace. And when I sort of put my mind around that, the first thing that struck me is that psychological safety is defined by the individual. Like, that assessment lives with me if I'm in a workplace. And then I did a little more research about creating organizations that intentionally want to have more psychological safety is a leadership responsibility. And the definition for creating psychological safety has 5 components. Clarity, so people kind of know what they're supposed to be doing. Contribution, everybody gets to step up to the plate. Confidence, which I guess we could explore. So it's helping people have confidence in their contribution, helping leaders be confident about setting the stage. Comfort, and I think this is a really deep and wide conversation. And connection. And the way I think about it is comfort, which is anybody who feels comfortable at work, feels typically connected to their colleagues, feels a degree of clarity and ability to contribute. So that kind of sets the stage. But what I think Juliet and I want to explore is where this notion of comfort and psychological safety and the notion of growth there's a tension there that needs to be explored. So that's kind of what we want to talk about today. Juliet, how did I do setting up the proposition?
I think it's perfect. I think, as you said, we talked a little bit before we started recording today, because it's such a core issue in the workplace, at least as far as I can see today, is the younger generation of workers are kind of demanding some of this and requiring this of employers. I I see this a lot in kind of, we talked about the vacation issue, people wanting to have that, as one of their benefits. Like, I want to know that I can take time off. And also the comfort around being able to say and advocate for yourself. And I think that is new in the workplace, even though I talk about it with leaders that they don't take time off and they don't do those things. But there is this new generation coming in, I shouldn't say they're coming in, because they're working, and people who are in their 40s now, just say 30s and 40s. And I think that we as leaders and, company CEOs and people who are building company culture need to have that mindset of, if we want to attract and keep people, which is also not part of today's culture, is people staying at one company for a long time. But the idea is, how do we keep somebody engaged for as long as we can, and providing that comfort and that space where people can contribute, feel like they're contributing, have the confidence to speak up. And I think that it is tension, because you also are encouraging people to take risks and get outside their comfort zone, especially as coaches. That's part of what we do. So I agree with that. There is this tension. And I think the old school way of looking at this is, I sometimes go to this scene from Mad Men, where, if you're a Mad Men fan, you'll remember this scene likely, where Peggy, who was a secretary and had just done her first pitch as a copywriter. And so she was all excited, and the pitch went well, and she was kind of moving up in her career. And she went to Don Draper, the main character, who was her boss, and she was asking him for feedback. And she was like, "You didn't say anything. You didn't, I need feedback. I need you to tell me that I did a good job." And he looked at her and he said, "That's what the money is for." And I love that, just because it tells you how different things are. Right. That's not what people are looking for right now. Yes, money's great, but it is the vacation. And it's also how I feel about being at work, and about my work, and about the company I work for. And that there is this level of responsibility at the corporate level, or at the leadership level, to provide this. But what's the responsibility of the actual person who's working at the company? What's their responsibility in creating this as well?
I do want to say that you've really painted a really good picture of a multi-generational workforce and what some of the drivers are. And I do want to address this. So what does the employee own, and what does leadership and management own on this spectrum? But one of the things that used to make me crazy, it still does when I see it, which is this notion that you hire people ideally for their potential, and then don't do anything to support their potential in a new role. And I love that both of us in our corporate careers, but also now leveraging our coaching skills, that's a piece of what we do. A piece of what we do is encourage people to advocate for themselves, to stretch, but also we champion them. I'm guessing in your coaching sessions, you look your clients in the eye and say, "I see you as a capable, strong person." And they get that feedback that Don Draper wasn't willing to give Peggy. Whether it's from you or their boss, right? There's a contribution that they get by being seen and by being validated. So anyway, I just wanted to put a plug in there for championing our clients, which is something that I think is really, really important.
We are champions for our clients, and we're also pushing them to take those risks and to get out of their comfort zone a little bit. So I think that is the mix. Helping people feel confident and comfortable while pushing them outside their comfort zone is is kind of that cocktail that happens in the coaching world. And when it's working, it's really fun.
Yeah. And I would say our job first and foremost is to create a safe environment for our clients. So they can say, I really want to do this hard thing. And then we support them or push them, depending, so that they go do that hard thing. We can't show our audience what you showed me before we started, but it's a beautiful depiction of the relationship between comfort and safety, stretching and growth, and the danger zone. And I don't know if you want to describe it, or since I've just sort of uttered those words, I should. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I can describe it. This is from the Berkeley Executive Coaching Institute that I am getting my certification in. And it's a great visual of how coaching works. And so we live in our comfort zone, which is kind of the core of the structure. And we're most comfortable there.
Is it safe to call it a bullseye?
Yeah.
Like there's three concentric rings.
Yes, that's great. Yeah, the visual of that. Okay. So if you can picture a bullseye, the center of the bullseye is your comfort zone. That's where you live. That's where you prefer to be. And when we get into situations, not just in coaching, but in life, in our careers, where we learn is outside of the comfort zone. It's in the stretch zone. It's where we're taking risks, where we're speaking up, where we're saying things that we're a little afraid to say, but we're going to say it anyway. But beyond that is the outside edges of that are the danger zone. And that's where you alluded to this earlier when we were talking, is the flight or fight, where you are just like, I got to get out of here. This is too scary. And so I think what we're trying to talk about today is, how do we help as organizations? How do we create an environment where risk-taking is encouraged and rewarded, and we don't push people so far out of their comfort zone that they are scared and uncomfortable. So supportive risk-taking, I guess, is how I would call it.
Right. Yeah. And it's interesting because the way you just described that, you described it as the organization sort of helping people stretch and grow, but not pushing them into the danger zone. And what's interesting is that if you're an individual in any experience, whether it's corporate or, in the world doing whatever, when you feel like you're in danger. And that's where trauma can happen. Trauma with a capital T, but also trauma with a lowercase t. The experience where you think, I'm never doing that again. That was too scary. That was too frightening. And it has the opposite effect of, yes, you learn, but you learn not to grow, not to take risks, because it's too scary. And I think one of the things that you mentioned, and I want to invite you to share a little bit more about that, is that when people come into a workforce or into an employer situation, they all come in with different experiences of psychological safety. Maybe they are really robust and resilient, and they've never hit that, oh my God, I'm scared danger zone. They're going to experience the organization really differently than someone who has been ostracized, belittled, shunned in their organization because they have taken some risks and it has bitten them. So, can you share what you were thinking earlier about, how to think about psychological safety for individuals, but in a group setting, in an organization? What are some about that?
We all come into the workplace with some experience, as you noted. Often it is traumatic. Often we've had workplace environments that don't feel safe. And so as employers, we have a responsibility, yes, to create a comfortable space, to create a safe space. But it's also important that the employee and the person who's coming in knows how to recognize their own trauma and knows and has the tools to be able to have some emotional intelligence around what they bring. So when someone comes into the workplace who is struggling or has been struggling, how do we create that safe space so that they can show up fully, but also take responsibility for what they're bringing into the room? And I had a conversation with some clients the other day. I'm working with this leadership team of a finance department, and somebody said we do a check-in at the beginning, and someone said, "Oh, I'm not feeling well today." And, unfortunately, they had come to work, which I don't like when people come to work when they're not feeling well, especially post-COVID. We know better. Anyway, but she said, "I don't feel good today. And so, if I'm quiet, that's why." And I pointed out how great that was that she said that. Now we know what this person has brought with them that day. And we know not to take it personally that she's quiet, that, we don't have to ask her what's wrong. She's already told us that she's struggling for whatever reason she's struggling. And I think that it's really important to point that I wanted to point that out to the group, saying, this is what you're looking for in a team. You want someone to be able to say, "Hey, I'm not on my game today," or "I am really excited. I'm really present. I'm ready to take on more," whatever those things are, but to convey that to your team so that everyone knows where you're coming from. Take that into the larger sense. I'm bringing in, this trauma that I had. I had a really shitty boss. I had, this chaotic environment that I worked in. Whatever those situations are, is finding a way to share that so that people understand kind of where you're coming from and what your experience has been, in order to be able to be a functional team, a functional collaborator. I don't know if that makes sense, but...
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense to me. And I'm going back to those 5 C's of psychological safety.
Yeah.
And what you've really hit on is, one is connection, which is people talking to each other about what is going on, both below the line and above the line. What's the work of the work? But also the clarity for someone to say, "I'm on my game today, I'm really excited," or "I'm not on my game today." There's kind of a give and take that behavior, that admission implies. And it actually creates that psychological safety. So I love that. And the thing that I'm thinking right now, I'm going to just really kind of channel a devil's advocate, which is, these are workplaces. This is about getting work done. This is not about hand-holding. This is not about helping everybody feel happy. Why should we care? Why should we take the time to create an organization that cares about psychological safety? And I have my answer, but Juliet, I'd love you to respond first, and then I'll pile on.
Okay. For me, it comes down to productivity and efficiency, because I'm an operations person. And if you are not feeling psychologically safe, if you are living in your trauma, if you are worrying about if someone else is liking you or not liking you, or, they're quiet today, what I do, would I say something? Your focus and your energy is going on the thing and the person, and not the work. And I talk about that with these teams as well, is when you are not working efficiently, you're not getting feedback, you're worried about the thing that is, does that person like me? I don't, what's next? When's the other shoe going to drop? You're sitting in that world of uncertainty. And that world of uncertainty is taking energy away from the work. And so that, to me, is why organizations need to invest. And there's a lot of divesting going on of what were kind of norms in the workplace. And part of it is because, and to me, what's happening in that world right now, in our world right now, is a lot of uncertainty. The productivity is suffering because people aren't feeling safe.
Yeah, absolutely. You probably said it better than I will. And that's that an organization that is really, to use some classic expressions, firing on all cylinders, that is optimizing its talent and its resources, wants people who feel enlivened by the workplace, challenged by the content, but not the personal experience of being at work. Those organizations do great when it comes to whatever product they're selling, whatever goal they're trying to achieve. They also excel at attracting and retaining people for the right reasons. And, so psychological safety is a hard thing to get, I think, in a lot of workplaces, to get leadership to focus on as being an important aspect of the workplace. But the consequences of not having a psychologically safe workplace are enormous.
I want to add something, and that is the responsibility of the individual. And I touched on it a little earlier, but I do want to encourage people in the workplace to think about what they are bringing to their jobs and what is your trauma. And again, I'm not talking about digging in and solving your childhood issues. But what I'm talking about is taking responsibility for how you're showing up. If you've had a bad day, if you had a fight with your partner, if you are suffering in some way, it is coming to the workplace, and being able to identify it and think about, how do you want to show up at work today? Even if you want to show up, I'm only 50%, but I'm there. And being able to be honest about that. And sometimes we're not going to share that because it isn't appropriate, but just being conscious of that. So when somebody says something to you in a meeting and you take it personally and you feel your feelings are hurt by it, how do I know what that line is in terms of, is this person really doesn't like me or really has a hard time with me? Or am I just hypersensitive today because I'm struggling? Or does this remind me of another workplace that I worked at that was totally dysfunctional, and now I'm freaking out because I think that it's going to happen again? Those are real feelings, and they should not be discounted. But understanding those feelings and being able to show up, understanding that how I'm processing it is likely very different than how someone is conveying it, and also being able to take that responsibility and walk away from the situation more curious than afraid or in that danger zone, that fight or flight moment.
Yeah. The power of curiosity. I love that. What this conversation is bringing up for me is that moment in our most recent podcast recording with Kim Bender, when she said she has a ED who looks for board members with emotional maturity. And I think that's really what you're talking about. You're talking about the growth edge for all of us, no matter how old we are, as we go through our life, to always try to show up as emotionally mature as we can. And that's being self-aware. And I think there's another really big intersection here, which actually is the thing that I forgot a few minutes ago, which is the role of emotional intelligence at work. There is a reason why emotional intelligence is considered an enormously valuable paradigm for leaders and employees to understand. Because if you pretend that people don't show up with their emotions, you're ignoring 80% of what's actually happening in the room, which again distracts from productivity and goal achievement and growth. And so it really matters that we kind of got our finger on the pulse of what's going on in the room beyond what people are actually talking about in terms of the work.
100% agree. I think that it's everything. It just reflecting on a time in my career when I was struggling just in a lot of different ways, and I would cry. People would hurt my feelings. I would allow people to hurt my feelings, and I cried at work. And I remember this moment of thinking, wow, I haven't cried at work in 2 weeks. That's great. Thinking that I'd made a lot of progress at that point in time. And, I wasn't ready to understand the concept of, separating what's actually happening from what's happening in my brain. And I do think that's where the growth is. And that is the leadership challenge. So I want to say that I want to encourage everyone to think about psychological safety at work, how you can create more safety for your organizations, but also how you can talk about it with your leaders. And, this idea of helping the incoming leaders or potential leaders or emerging leaders to gain that emotional intelligence that they need to develop themselves, but also the culture of the organization.
Yeah. I just want to add that I think it's really important to remind us all, no matter where we are on the org chart or in our career or on our career path, that being comfortable, while it occasionally feels really good, isn't actually serving us. It's that zone just outside the comfort zone where we're learning new things and we're adding new skills to our toolbox and we're being introduced to different ways of thinking about things. That's where the real growth happens. And it is each of our individual jobs to make sure that we're watching where that growth edge is and that we're seeking it, that we are stepping towards the growth edge rather than, I just really like being here and being comfortable. If we have aspirations to doing more, we have to be living at that growth edge. And I think it's fair to say not everybody really wants to do more or has aspirations for leadership positions. But I think since you and I are talking about the secrets of the C-suite, being at that growth edge, as uncomfortable as it may be, is a lot of what you do throughout your career to continue to rise. Literally and figuratively.
Agreed. Yeah. Let's get comfortable with being a little uncomfortable.
Very well said. So, Juliet, I think we're kind of at the end of this.
Let's wrap this up, Susan. Yes,
let's
absolutely.
Wrap this baby up. I want to say thank you to our listeners, to our audience, those of you who subscribe and tune in regularly. Thank you so much. Please think about sharing this or another episode with your friends. And if you haven't done so yet, please subscribe. Please leave us a 5-star rating. We're really grateful that you follow along and enjoy our conversations and our guests. And we'll look forward to knowing that you're out there when we meet again for our next recording. This is Susan saying goodbye. We're so glad you've joined us for this episode of Secrets of the C-Suite, the podcast. We'll be back with another episode in 2 weeks. In the meantime, please tell your friends and coworkers about us, and be sure to follow, subscribe, and give us a 5-star rating if you enjoyed listening. Secrets of the C-Suite is produced by Juliet Clothier, Susan Sutherland, and Brian Clothier. Original music is by Brian Clothier, and the podcast is inspired by leaders like you.